Welcome back to another episode of the BambooSZN Podcast, the podcast where we hear stories of resilience, transformation, and growth. My guests and myself share our true stories, raw, authentic, to help inspire you. Now, today's podcast is sponsored by Optimal Human Superfood Green Juice. The taste is phenomenal. My fatigue is lowered. My energy is up. My focus is sharp. Use my link in the description of this podcast, and you'll get 5 free sticks and your own shaker bottle. Now, June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and my guest today has a truly amazing story of resilience, of transformations, ups, downs, highs, lows, everything. He is a best-selling author and celebrity chef, also the first African-American chef here in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace. I bring you the one, the only, Chef Jeff Henderson.
How you doing, my man?
Good, man. I'm so glad to finally get you on here. You know, scheduling is tough with everybody. You know, we're all busy adults, and I know the work you do in the community and the world. So I truly appreciate you giving me an hour of your time today.
It's an honor. I heard great things about you. I've listened to some of your podcasts and some phenomenal stories of resilience and transformation. So it's an honor to be here.
That's what it's about. Yes. And the way I found you was, you probably don't remember because it's so long ago and there's so many people, but in 2016, I went through the Hope for Prisoners program.
Okay.
I'm not a felon or anything, but I did go to jail for some time. My PO was like, hey, you want to try to get a job or anything, go to this program. So I went through the program, and they brought you in as a speaker, maybe the last day or something. And I remember just hearing you speak and then tell your story of, you know, how you went to prison, you became a chef while in prison, got out, had this success story, you know, doing the books, and just literally changed your life, which at that point in my life, I never would have thought that somebody can do that after going to prison. Also, somebody who looks like me, like an African-American male, I'm like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah. I
can get out of this rut that I'm in. Because at that point, I was having trouble getting jobs because of my background. So there was moments of like feeling like defeated. And then I heard you speak and tell your story, and it was just powerful. Time went on throughout life. And I used to always tell people about you and the story you shared. And then somehow, some way, I got into this space now. I met Adam Clausen and other people, and I started seeing you again pop up finally on Instagram. I was like, oh, Chef Jeff.
He's still around, huh?
Yeah, that's him again. And he's still doing the damn thing.
Yeah.
So I truly appreciate you coming, and just tell us a little bit about what you do now, and then we'll dive into your story a little bit.
Well, life is interesting. You know, a lot of twists and turns in my life. Blessed to have turned 60. I'll be 61 next month.
Okay.
I mean, things that I've been through, adverse challenges, you know, every day I wake up, I get a chance and a choice to get life right, you know. Been out of prison now 29 years.
Okay.
Recently launched the Chef Jeff Project, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization based here in Las Vegas, right in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. My business is shut down, all my revenue streams, and, you know, I was sitting on a little bit of money and told the wife, I said, look, now's the time. She said, time for what? I said, well, I always had a vision to open up a little kitchen in the hood to bring in young people who were once like-minded, who are like-minded like how I used to be, you know, gang impacted, you know, been in the criminal justice system, poverty, no father at home, wayward thinking. And we opened right there on North Las Vegas Boulevard. And that was the launch of what we're doing here today. Our mission is to disrupt, crush, destroy the Clark County School District pipeline to Nevada Department of Correction. That's our goal, is to put them out of business, the federal BOP, all state systems around this country.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yes.
Man.
It's a $190 billion industry. Crime, folks of color, young people who are disconnected from the process to achieve the American dream is the new cotton of America. And I was in that system. I'm a byproduct of the school to prison pipeline. And so taking my lived experiences as a credible messenger, I believe I speak the language, and I have the blueprint to help guide, you know, young folks and adults to the promised land.
Wow, I had no idea. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you say you started in the middle of pandemic. So before you got to this point, we mentioned earlier you did do some time in prison. That's where you learned to become a chef. What led you, or what was your childhood like growing up? Let's start there. Where you from, and what was that like growing up?
Noel, when you get a chance, bring me that bag over here, please. I grew up in a traditional African-American family in inner city America. My family migrated from New Orleans, Louisiana, to Los Angeles in the early 1960s in hopes to achieve the American dream. My parents both grew up in extreme poverty, adverse childhood experiences, some abuse, lacked middle-class values, grew up in extreme poverty. During that time, my parents couldn't even go into the French Quarter in New Orleans unless they were workers there. My mother told me many stories about how they couldn't go into the candy store until after all the white kids went in, and then they would only let 5 black kids at the same time. My parents grew up in the projects, the Magnolia projects down there were notorious for poverty. And so I was born in L.A. in 1964. Parents marry young. They divorce young. And my mother struggled raising my sister and I. And I grew up in a family, in a community where we didn't see marriage work. We didn't see education work. We had no vision of the American dream. But there was something very unique about myself, born partially blind in the right eye. My lens in my right eye was thick as the bottom of a Coke bottle. Wow. I just saw the world different from my parents. And during integration in the Los Angeles Unified School District in the 1970s, we were bused out of the hood into the burbs. And so this 35 to 45-minute bus ride, I was a little homeboy who rushed to get on the bus first every day because I wanted the seat behind the school bus driver. It had the huge window. It didn't have a seam in the middle. And looking out of the window, I saw the American dream. I saw the burbs. I saw the multi-million-dollar homes. I saw middle-class, upper-class families. And I just began to question, why do we live where we live? Why can't we have a crib like this? And then internally, I went inside of these homes because I knew what they had. I watched Brady Bunch growing up. I watched Little House on the Prairie. I watched Lifestyle, the Rich and Famous. So I knew in wealthy homes there were mothers and fathers. I knew the kids had choices for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I knew there was a double-door refrigerator with an ice maker built in there. I knew there was a swimming pool, a basketball rim over the court. And that's something that I wanted. I never was a settler. I didn't settle or put myself in a box, even though my parents had that poverty mindset and they were okay paycheck to paycheck. They were okay never leaving out of the inner city. I didn't. I wanted more. And so that began to set the tone for that by any means necessary. And so there's a process to becoming criminalized. Nobody is born a criminal. I became criminalized out of one desire, and that desire was to help my mother put money in her pocket. And so when you look at the 1 out of 4 black males between the ages of 16 to 28 years old who are in state, federal, and juvenile systems across this country, the majority of them come from single-parent homes. They saw their mothers struggle. They saw their mothers have to prostitute themselves to get the rent paid. They saw the sugar daddies coming over and sleeping with their mothers who had families who lived in the burbs back in those days. It was survival mode. And so we understand in our community, the relationship between a father and a mother is unbreakable. That umbilical cord is never cut. You heard the term mama's boy.
Yeah.
Most young black boys who had to become the men of the house. My mother once told me, you the man in the house. Ain't no man here. You the man in the house. Well, how am I gonna be the man of the house when I never had man training? When I don't really understand the traits of becoming a manhood, which is middle-class value, faith, value in family, value in community. So it's a burden that many young black boys get forced upon them at a very young age. And so when you're called the man in the house, what does that mean? You got to start producing. You got to put food on the table. And so that's the birth of the criminal. That's what drives that hustler, that gangster, that violent tendencies, that anger in a lot of young black men, and probably some Hispanic men and poor white communities as well too.
And that led you to becoming a criminal, like you said. And would you join gangs? Were you robbing, stealing?
Yeah. Well, I've never been a dirty, scandalous criminal.
You pull it down a little bit?
Yep. I've never been a dirty, scandalous criminal. Like I've never robbed anybody. I wasn't a gang, never been a gang member because there was no money in gang banging. They couldn't show me no profit margin or a revenue stream from gang banging. So I was a hustler. As a youngster, I used to steal, breaking houses, steal bicycles, take the rims off, paint the bikes, cover sand off the registration number, resell them. I used to knock on doors and ask for soda bottles so I can trade them in. I used to sell kumquats down in San Diego when I was a young kid. Kumquats, these little small pieces of fruit. I used to go in people's yard and sell that fruit. And then I had a newspaper route, #1 newspaper bar. I was a candy seller. I used to sell gourmet chocolate candy in the burbs. Used to be these guys who would come down to the neighborhood in a white van and take all the homies to the burbs and sell gourmet chocolate. I sold out every night.
Wow.
And so I always had the gift of communication. I always had a sense of my surroundings. I was an analyst. I knew how to sell. I knew how to build relationships. Those were natural traits. A lot of those came from watching my grandfather, who used to work on the Mississippi River, came to California, and he swore up and down that he would never work for the man ever again in his life. And he had a 65 Chevy, and he carried a ladder, squeezy, mop bucket, and a mop in the back of his Chevy. And he used to clean wealthy Jewish bakeries and delicatessens up in Wilshire District, up in Beverly Hills. And so every summer and holidays, myself and my other male cousins had to go to work with my grandfather. So I was introduced to hustling. I was introduced to sense of urgency. I was introduced to resilience and mental toughness as a young boy. Because when you experience poverty, and you've been through the gamut of survival, and you know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. You can create a meal out of commodity food. There's nothing that you can't handle. And that's what's so powerful about guys and gals who have been incarcerated before. It's almost comparative to enslaved Africans. During slavery, we endured so much. And then finally, when we got those shackles off and they say, go for your American dream, we built communities. We had banks. We had Wall Street in Tulsa. We had institutions. And so I look at that. I draw a parallel to that time in American history and culture to coming out of prison. And so how I wound up getting into prison was in the early 1980s when the so-called war on drugs came out, and rock cocaine. Before it was called crack, it was called rock. In the early 1980s, I was a youngster coming out of high school in 82, and rock, crack just showed up in the hood. The AK-47s, the 9mm, the guns showed up in our neighborhood. Somebody shared the formula to turn powder cocaine into rock cocaine, which flooded black and brown communities across this country. Businesses were destroyed in our communities. Our real estate went down because of the gang violence and the drive-by shootings. But also 3 multi-billion-dollar industries was born out of the crack cocaine and gangster rap industry. Gangster rap, multi-billion-dollar business was born. Many R&B singers couldn't get contracts back in those 80s because they were only funding negative gangster rap, killing bitches, hoes, drive-by shootings, glorifying the street gangster drug dealer life. Then you had the fashion industry that was born out of the 1980s crack cocaine era. You're talking about Dooney and Burke, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, the nail shops, the hair shops, the weave industry. We bought Cadillacs, we bought Mercedes-Benz. The diamond and gold industry was born out of that. I remember a quick story. Downtown Los Angeles, there was an Armenian guy. He owned a little small, maybe 600 square foot jewelry store. And that's where all the drug dealers went to get their Turkish rope, rope chains, big old Mercedes medallions, all those different things. And then what happened in the early 1980s, athletes wanted to be like us. They started buying all the jewelry. That's why most athletes, basketball players, they look like former drug dealers of the 1980s. They had the gadgets, the trinkets, the cars, the loud music, all the fashion, the Dooney Burke, Gucci, all those things. So we created industries. On top of that, modern day mass incarceration, which is now $190 billion industry. We became the new cotton of America. Inside of federal, state prisons across this nation, we build product for government, private industry. When you think about the airplane seats you sit on, 80% of the seats on all commercial airlines are made in prison. Every time you go to the dentist and you're getting a new grill and you make that impression in that clay, that's sent to the prison, and inmates are building those dentures. When you go to Costco, when you go to Walgreens and all these other type eye lens places where you get 2 pair of prescription eyeglasses for $99, they're being manufactured in state and federal prisons. It's big business, man.
Damn.
And then there's the whole psychological and cultural impact. This is a whole nother show to really talk about that, how that impacts communities of color. I was there. You know, this is lived experience. I don't speak about nothing that I never lived or been through. Became a millionaire at the age of 19. Never had a fight when I was in the drug business. Never was gang affiliated. I sold to everybody, anybody who was interested. So during this time on the streets, I learned how to manage a diverse workforce. And today I'm in the workforce business. So when you think about guys who come from all different lives, how do you manage trauma? How do you manage anger? How do you manage violent tendencies? I became an expert in that. And those are some of the best practices and the trainings and stuff that I teach to young people in the community or maybe coming out of prison who come from those adverse lived experiences.
Damn, I didn't know about the prison and everything they make. I've only known what I've seen on shows or movies, you know, movies depict them doing the license plates or, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Well, license plates are mandatory made in every state prison.
Okay.
But those are the things that they don't want you to see. They don't advertise that. And so there's been a lot of lawsuits with Small Business Administration with the prisons because we take away a lot of the work that people in the community could be doing. One of the prisons I was in was Terminal Island Federal Prison. We made all the metal steel lockers for governments. We also made the wire harnessings for F-14 Tomcats. These are all the wiring for military fighter jets. Those were Navy jets at that time. So there's a lot of product and merchandise manufactured in prisons in the Midwest and down in the South, farmland. I spent 3 days in Angola State Penitentiary, one of the most notorious prisons in America, which sits on a 19,000-acre plantation. So probably 80 to 90% of all the produce, vegetables, fruit, everything comes off of that prison that you'll find in your local grocery stores and farmers market. They produce horses down there. That's a crossbreed of mule and a horse, because those horses, that breed of a mule and a horse are death. So when the prison guards are riding on those horses, they got to fire a shot. It doesn't startle those particular horses. So they breed those horses for other prisons as well. Hunting dogs. All you wouldn't believe. Art is unbelievable.
And how we're going on track of what you did to actually get into prison.
Yes. So during the early 1980s, I was manufacturing crack. Part of my life that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
So when you think about Chef Jeff's story, how I went from cooking cocaine to cooking prison cuisine to becoming a gourmet chef at the world-renowned Bellagio and Caesar's Palace Hotel. I worked for Marriott, Holiday Inn, Hotel Bel Air, L'Ermitage, Ritz-Carlton, Marina Del Rey, all 4- or 5-star properties. In that era, how you take a powder substance and cook that through a formula. There's a formula for that. H2. Well, I don't want to get into the formula for that, right? But you're able to stretch. Take like 1 kilo of cocaine and turn that into 2, maybe 3, depending on the purity of that particular cocaine. And back in those days, it was Peruvian cocaine, which was yellow, and then you had the Colombian cocaine that was white. And so they impacted the crack smoker differently. And so whatever was that most potent, you can step on it heavier with the ingredients, stretch it where you can still get high, but you quadruple your profit margin. And so I was known as a cook, millionaire at the age of 19, had custom built houses, luxury cars. Again, a part of my life I'm not proud of. In 1988, I got indicted by the federal government. And during that period, everyone that's coming in on federal conspiracy, the same charges they use called CCE is how they brought down the mafia, where they don't have to catch you physically ever committing a crime. All you have to do is conspire with 2 or 3 more people, mean talk about it, or someone else getting caught with a product, and then you get indicted on a conspiracy because you're tied to that, whatever that crime was that was committed. And I got indicted in 1988, where I was facing 10 years of life in prison. And I wound up serving nearly 10 years. But looking back now at 60 years old, is the best thing ever happened to me. Like, prison saved my life. And I don't tell this to youngsters. I needed to go. I had to go. And the reason why is because I believe in people's success. You have to be successful. I don't care what it is. There's a process you have to go through. There's a level of hell. There's a level of pain. It's like you work out. No hurt, no big shirt. No pain, no gain. And that's the process in business and in life. And so in prison taught me discipline. It taught me structure. It taught me mental toughness. Anytime you can endure, Adam Clausen, good friend of ours, 20-some years in prison. You know, another friend of mine's named Shaka Senor, 19 years in prison. Ooh. A lot of my homeboys and former lifers had double life in prison. Imagine doing 30 years and then getting out because of the laws of changing or whatever reason that may be. If you can withstand the mental agony of living in a fucking cage, man. I don't know if you've been in a cage before. You know what that feels like. There's no French windows. There's no choices for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know, it's a place to where you forget what it sounds like to hear a bird chirp, a baby cry, a dog bark. Ooh. And so in order to survive that and walk out of prison with a sense of normalcy, that's the highest level of mental toughness and grit that you can imagine. And so this is why you see some folks coming out of the system being ultra successful with a criminal record, is because they were able to transfer those skill sets, those traits from surviving prison into the business world, the workforce, and in life.
Let me ask you this, because I like what you just said. What do you think, in your opinion, based off your experience with yourself and people you've seen? Because I know there's people like you who get out and your friends who can transfer that skill set into business and back to regular life. What about the people who are unable to almost, what's it called? Not Stockholm Syndrome. When they're so
institutionalized?
Yes, institutionalized.
Yes.
So what do you think is the differential? Is just the person by person, or who people get out after 10, 12 years, they go back to what they're doing, or they can't handle being back into normalcy?
Yeah. Let me clarify something. I don't care who you are. If you lived in a cage, you've been shackled, and you've been in confinement, everyone has a level of institutionalization. Now, some mask it very well. Some learn how to deal with that throughout life. Many others don't. And so depending on how you programmed while you were serving time determines where and how far you go in life after prison. You see, a lot of guys do their bit and they lay down. So I don't know if you know that term, lay down, when you go to prison. Fuck it, man, I ain't working for these people. I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to walk the yard. I'm going to gamble. I'm going to play basketball every day. I ain't doing shit. Then you have those who are in the system like myself and like Adam, who program. We went to school. I earned my high school diploma, 28 different certificates. I used to be a barber in prison. I had an underground catering business in prison because I worked in the kitchen and the bakery and rose to the ranking of head inmate baker and head inmate cook. So I had a legal catering business in prison. So when I was in prison in the mid 1980s and 90s, it was called Club Fed. I was locked up with Ivan Boesky, Michael Milken, Wall Street, multi-gazillionaires in prison who taught business classes, marketing classes, public relation classes. We had a Toastmasters in prison.
Really?
Yes. And we also had a think tank. Wow. And so if you go through Cooked, it's in there. I have receipts for every single piece of
New York Times. New York Times bestseller, baby. Yes. Go get it. Hey.
And those are 2 or 4 books that I've written. So I started my writing career in prison. And so, in prison is very segregated. Whites have their own TV room, blacks, Hispanics, Pacific Islanders. Then you have the religious section there. You got the Muslims, you got the Christians, you got atheists, you got the Jewish community. And so everybody has their card. We call them cars. Like, what car are you rolling in? So, sometimes if you're from Vegas, Nevada, you're from the 702 car. San Diego, 619, LA, 510 or 213. And so in prison, I started... I was wilding out when I first went in. I was my former name on the street was Hardhead. He's called me Jeff Hardhead. That was my nickname. Everybody had a nickname, right? And so when I first went in, you got every card trying to recruit guys. You know, the Muslims trying to convert everybody to Islam, the Christians trying to convert you to Christianity, right? And so there were some men in prison, had long locks. You know, they were part of the Black Liberation Army. Back then, I don't know if you're familiar with them, you're kind of young, look them up. They used to smuggle guns from Mexico during the civil rights era of the 1960s. And so they were trying to recruit me by giving me books. You know, The Nation, Message to the Black Man. The Black Liberation Army members gave me a book called Black Men, Obsolete, Single, Dangerous. And another group gave me a book called Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, and another book called They Came Before Columbus by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. And I'm like, I don't read this shit. I don't know nothing about no history. I know American history. We was once enslaved. We grew up poor. That's all I knew. And then one time the prison went on lockdown. And so I'm sitting on my bunk. I had a top bunk. I always got the top bunk instead of the bottom bunk. It's, for one, it's safer. Somebody wanted to rush you. It's harder to get hands on you on top bunk versus that bottom bunk, right? And so prison went on lockdown. I had a little night light. And the books were just there. And so I just grabbed one of them. And it happened to be called Black Men, Obsolete, Single, Dangerous. And you know how you open a Bible or your book of faith, and for some reason, when you open that, it goes to a passage that speaks directly to you. And in the passage in this book called Black Men, talked about why black men stand on corners. And it was interesting because I always stood on corners. That's in the hood. It's like the listening post, like the Native Americans in Alaska. They had the totem pole, and the teepee in Africa came around the fire. And so we always had somewhere in the neighborhood where all the brothers hung out. Well, that's where the information comes to, all the hot goods and things. And so I started reading through this chapter, and I was reading about black men who wasn't hustlers and drug dealers. Like, these guys were intellectuals. They were global thinkers. They were bankers. They were entrepreneurs. I'm like, fuck, why my teacher ever give me a book? I was like pumped up. I'm like, damn, this brother's doing it. And I just kept reading more and more. And then over a period of time, I just started to think different, man. I started to really analyze being in that prison cell. Instead of being angry and blaming everyone, my parents, the community, the informant, the homies, I started to deep dive into who I was. And so part of the process of transformation for any man, woman, or young person is that everyone must have a miracle. It takes a miracle to shift your life. Some say miracle, some say epiphany. Something has to happen for you to change your life. And so me being in that cell, me reading that book, me learning about who I was, coming into a knowledge of self, I knew in order to change, I had to love myself. And I never loved myself because my father didn't have the knowledge, or my grandfather, to teach me the history and the culture and to be proud of who I was. The media put us in a cage: savage, uncivilized, drug dealer, violent, no good, needs to be in prison, will wind up in prison one day. So all those narratives are ingrained in young men who come from the streets with those lived experiences, and you wind up in prison. So to crank this up here a little bit, I became an avid reader. And as I began to read and be coached and counseled by this mass of men, not just black men, not just conscious black men, but even white dudes, man. The first Jewish guy that I knew personally was in prison. First African I met was in prison. The first dude I met from Iceland. I met people from Germany, Russia. You know, prison doesn't discriminate, especially the Fed system, because everybody was in there for big paper. Yeah. So you had all the Canadians were in there for smuggling steroids into the country during Arnold Schwarzenegger days when he was getting built up, bodybuilt. They were the big money counterfeiters. You had all the hedge fund traders, the Wall Street boys who was in prison for greed. You had people in there for embezzlement. You had bank robbers, money launderers, and you had the cartel. Colombian cartel, Peruvian cartel, and you had the Mexican cartel. Then you had the high-level black street gangs from all the sets, basically out of LA. You had Chicago sets, you had down south, you had the Midwest, you had the Bay Area, you had down in San Diego, and you had the Las Vegas cars in the prison system. So to be around sophisticated men, if you were a multi-millionaire drug dealer, you're not a dummy. You understand business. You know how to manage people. You understand how to build a brand. You understand marketing. You understand competition. You understand export, import, distribution, logistics. You understand bottom line, your numbers. You understand labor. You know how to motivate, engage, and move talent. All those are transferable skills into anything legitimate on the outside.
I heard a quote, somebody say something similar about what you're saying of them already knowing and having the tools. They said something along the lines of, don't change the hustle, change the product.
That's Chef Jeff's line right there.
Is it
so
really?
If you heard that somewhere else, that's Chef Jeezy. It is in my books, right? Keep the hustle, change the product.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It's crazy. I had a guest a few months ago. She was trafficked into sex work. And when she was getting out, and she got to a point where she needed to make money and all these things, and she was trying to get out of the cycle of staying into it. And she talked to herself and said, you know how to make money. Just make it a different way now. So she started raising money for a local nonprofit and becoming the top fundraiser for them to help women out of sex work. And I think it's beautiful because like I said, the hustle, you just change the product of what you're doing.
Yes. But hustles is tough now because a lot of people overuse that word. And so, hustle is a mindset. Right. And so I coined the term hustlepreneur, hustlepreneurship versus entrepreneurship. You can go to college and get a degree in entrepreneurship, right? You learn the basics, marketing, branding, PR, how to sell, how to communicate. But when you're a hustlepreneur, you have unique sets of traits that are only built upon based on adverse lived experiences, right? So when you think about mental toughness, you can't teach mental toughness. You can't teach grit. You can't teach hustle. Those are traits that are developed through a specific lived experience, right? So when you grow up in poverty, you don't hustle, you don't eat. You don't help mama get money, ain't no food on the table. So you find creative ways how to build those revenue streams. And this is why when the stock market crashes, you have those jumping out of windows. Because they can't handle that shit. Like a real hustler, lose everything and build it back multiple times over and over again. And so this is what I try to do when I'm in the community and I travel this country, whether it's in prisons, working in workforce development, is to teach people, to help people figure out what their gift is. What is that one thing that you do well at the highest level? That's the gift. And so you play to your strengths and you manage around your weakness. The problem with a lot of folks, especially folks who have the blinders of poverty on, is that we focus and spend too much money trying to become subject matter experts what we naturally suck at. You see what I'm saying? Wealthy, successful people, they understand one thing. They only focus on what they're good at. And they put people around them that are experts at where they suck at. Look at Elon Musk. He motherfucking don't know nothing about building rockets and shit. He had the vision. His mindset is his gift. His visionary thinking is his gift. He went out, he saw the rocket. He saw the electric car. So he went out and found all the engineers in every one of those spaces, and he built rockets in electric car. Same with Steve Jobs from Apple. He ain't no engineer. He had the vision for what the iPhone and the Mac computer look like. He went out and got the #1 glass guy, the #1 metal guy, the #1 chip guy. And when you bring all of those gifts together, you create a product.
You ever see, are you familiar with BlackBerries, the phone?
Oh, I had them.
Yeah. So there's a real good movie on.
Look in there, you see an NEC phone. If you don't know what that is, open that book up in the middle. Yeah, it's a big brick phone back in the days.
There's a movie on Hulu or something about BlackBerry, about the story of it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to watch because they talk about the height of it. They give statistics. 80 or 90% of cell phones were BlackBerries, right? Then it goes and it shows the moment. They're all in the engineers, all in the shop, and they're all watching something. The guy comes in like, "What you guys watching?" They're looking, and it's Steve Jobs doing his presentation about the iPhone being introduced. And they were like, "That's stupid. Everybody wants to touch the button, and that iPhone's not going to work." And then fast forward to the movie at the end, it was like 0% of people in the world own BlackBerries. And I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to go back to something I wanted to ask you.
The problem with BlackBerry,
what?
They didn't evolve.
True.
iPhone evolves every freaking year.
I love my BlackBerry too.
Yeah, BlackBerry was a solid phone.
Good.
Yep. They didn't evolve.
You're familiar with wow, I just forgot his name. David West. Is it David West? Coffee Bean. Damon West.
Damon West.
Yeah, are you familiar with Damon West?
His name, yes.
So I heard his story on a podcast, and he spoke about a Muslim man he met in prison that kind of coined that coffee bean term from him and helped him change his mindset of how he wanted to move within prison. Was there anybody for you or anything while you were in prison that like helped you switch that mindset and stuff?
Yes, I think there were a collective of men, right? And it's just like, so when you shift that mindset, you talk about, Oprah used to always talk about aha moments, right? And then you hear folks talk about planting seeds for long-term growth and development. You plant a seed in a person, and now the seed has to be watered from this person, this experience, that experience until it begins to bloom. Once it blooms and it continues to evolve, more and more flowers and branches and limbs will come off of that, right? And so in prison, it was quite a few. I would have to say the defining moment for me in prison was a couple gentlemen. One was the white Wall Street guys, who I took a lot of heat for hanging out with them. And the reason why I hung out with them and built strategic relationships with them is because they lived the life as a little boy with the 4-eye glasses who rode through the suburbs on the school bus. I saw a lifestyle that I wanted, and I wanted it legit. So they were a defining moment for me because prior to going to prison, I didn't know any white people. I never had dinner at a white person's house. I thought white people ate different food than us. I never been a sleepover. I never been in a car with anybody white but a white police officer, right? And so that cultural experiences was powerful for me. So when you hear people talk about the power of diversity, I look at it different. I don't mean diversity in terms of favoritism or getting a job, right? In order to truly build business and to build relationships, you have to be comfortable with people from all walks of life. And so prison taught me that. It gave me that. So a lot of credit goes out to the white population in prison. So then there was like Kevin X. Kevin X was part of the Nation Islam, and he taught me strength. He taught me grit. He taught me what does it take to survive. He taught me history. He taught me culture. And then there was another guy by the name of MZ who gave me the book Black Men. Was another guy who really watered my seeds. And then there was Mr. Womack. Mr. Womack was the eldest brother of Bobby Womack, the blues singer, old R&B guy. And Mr. Womack taught me how to cook in prison.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And there was another guy, Mr. Womack taught me how to cook, and it was a Native American named Roboil. He was from Alaska. He taught me how to bake, so I understand the science of baking, quick breads and then yeast, baguettes, donuts, cookies, Boston cream pies, all those cheat cakes, all those type of things. I used to cook in prison. And so how I got those relationships with those Wall Street boys is I had all the cookies for sale, all the cinnamon rolls. I had all the chicken, the red onions. You know how that stuff flows out the kitchen. So I was that guy. So I bartered that. So for me to find a way to get to these guys was important. But I have to say, Mr. Womack, he became like a father to me. He called me son. I was a son that he never had before. I
like what you said earlier because I don't know if you noticed, but the title of the podcast is BambooSZN, based off the story of bamboo, similar to what you said. You plant the seed, you water it, don't know when it's going to hit the surface and start growing, but once it does, it flourishes.
Yes.
And that's the story of why the podcast is called BambooSZN, based off that story. Also, something you said that I can kind of relate to is I never went to prison, but I've been to jail, and I did 2 months. And I remember when I was in there, at one point I became a trustee my last 30 days, and you get to pass the plates out and you get extra plates.
Yes.
And I never thought in my life I would be in that position to where I had like 4 or 5 extra plates, and I'm out there bartering. Hey, you want some deodorant? I need deodorant. You want a plate? I got you. So they would start giving me deodorant, Doritos, soups.
Oh yeah.
So I was never eating the jail food because I was giving out the trays because they love it.
Yes.
Especially the desserts. They get all the desserts, make their own cakes.
Yes.
And that was just like not an aha moment, but like a interesting moment for myself.
Yeah, because food is so important to someone who's locked up. Yeah. And food is money. You trade for T-shirts and
coffee.
underwear, haircuts, coffee, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
It's a form of currency. And so food is a very powerful metaphor. And we incorporate that into our training today at the Chef Jeff Project too. So.
I even almost started a fight over a honey bun. I told, before I became a trustee, I told this kid, I didn't know how Joe worked at the time. And I'm like, hey, let me use one of your phone calls. I'll give you a honey bun. He's like, cool. I make the phone call, nobody answers. So I tell him, like, hey, I didn't get to use a phone call, so I'll give you the honey bun once I get the call. Little did I know, he had already made a side deal with the trustee for the honey bun. So I'm watching it happen. The trustee comes up to him, like, where's it at? And he's like, well, he didn't give it to me. He's like, that ain't my problem. Where's my honey bun?
Yes.
And I'm seeing it go down. I'm like, all right, here, bro. I gave him the honey bun.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, the little young kid, he's like 19. The other dude's like probably 40s. Young kid comes up to him and he's like, let's go outside. So they go outside and everybody's watching. They start fighting. Black dude beats up the little Mexican kid. He's bloody. Mexican kid comes in and tells, goes straight to the CO. Hey, he hit me. Lock us down, took them out. And because the trustee got took, and I was the only one in that cell or that pod sentenced for 30 days, they made me a trustee. And I was like, damn, what a wild turn of events over a honey bun.
That's why in prison you don't trade, you don't trade,
Nah,
you don't borrow, you don't take. Yeah, it's consequences.
So boom, you're in prison, you changing your mindset, you start cooking. Did you know you're getting out? Like, at what point did you realize you're getting out at 10 years as opposed to doing life? Because you got 10 to life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was a first-time nonviolent offender.
Okay.
So I did 9 years and 6 months.
Okay.
And so I knew I had my date, October the 2nd, 1996. And so preparation for that time coming out was tough. I mean, it's when your mind goes back into the past and, what are you going to do when you get out? You had decriminalized while you're in prison, thinking about family, thinking about your kid. I had one son, he was 5 years old when I went to prison. My mother still living, my father, my grandparents. I think the most important thing and I met the woman I wind up marrying. We've been married 29 years.
Wow.
Mr. Womack's niece.
Wow.
Thinking about what that relationship was going to be like. Is she really the one for me? How am I going to navigate that, being almost a decade without being intimate and being in a relationship and being sensitive, because prison desensitizes you, because you have to build up a level of mental toughness where you don't care about nothing. You're in survival mode. Nothing bothers you. You don't cry. You don't bleed. Any of those things. And so that was mind racking for me. But I knew I wanted to be a chef. I knew that I discovered something that I like to do, that I love to do, and that I can make money doing. And so that whole process to walking out, 8:30 in the morning, October 2nd, 1996, I walked to freedom. I was released from Sheridan, Oregon.
Wow.
Up in Sheridan.
And then how'd you get into going into the career? Because I'm sure at some point, with the felony and all that, it's hard to get jobs. Or maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure back in that time.
Well, be honest. It's interesting because my wife always says, honey, you need to talk about some of your struggles.
Yeah.
I never struggled when I got out. I just never did. I had experience dealing with, conversating with, negotiating with, relationships with wealthy white men in prison, Asian, Korean, Jewish people, Muslim people. So I wasn't inferior to anyone. So I know what it's like to sit at a table with a guy worth over $100 million. I know what it's like to sit at a table with Rosario Gambino, who was serving 45 years, running a heroin pizza connection, a drug ring out of New York City. So I was fearless. And so I came out, I had a mission, is to become a chef. But I knew that I had some challenges coming. I was pretty buff when I came out, and so I had no ass, no legs, was swole from the waist up, typical prison built, looking like upside down bowling ball pin, right? I had to learn to smile, clean shave my face.
That's what I remember now. And that talk you gave us, you said that. You said you went and got your teeth done, right? Or fixed or
grill,
something?
all that. Got an appointment. My daughter made an appointment for me on Saturday.
Yeah.
Get them done. So I get my teeth whitened twice a year. Wealthy, successful men have nice grills. So I had to get my grill right and clean shave, take makeup, cover my hair. I never got tatted up because I know so many people caught cases and was identified by tattoos, so I never got tats. And then sometimes when you get certain tats, especially from your neighborhood, you got the answer to those tats in prison. Like somebody gonna pull you to the carpet. Where you from? What set you from? And then you got to pull your shirt off eventually. Now you tatted up from that neighborhood and you may not have no crew. So I never wanted to be in that situation. So for me, coming out with a game plan, one of my case managers gave me an article in the USA Today about the top black chefs in the country. At the time it was Patrick Clark, Marcus Samuelson, and Robert Gatsby. And Robert Gatsby was a British black guy. And first time I read, I didn't know what a chef was. I have no experience cooking but drugs. And I said, I'm going to reach out to this guy. Robert Gatsby was opening up at 672 Wilshire and La Brea. And I started writing letters for prison. He never responded. So as soon as I got out, got a weekend pass, my girl at the time drove me up to his restaurant. And I came there, I had the article, everything. I had pictures of my prison cuisine. And I went in there and introduced myself, said, how you doing, Mr. Gatsby? I'm Jeff Henderson. I just got released from prison. I wrote you some letters while I was locked up. I'm not sure if you ever got them. He said, I got them. And he said, I never wrote you because if you were serious, you would show up. And I showed up there to his restaurant. He told me he didn't have nothing at the time. So it was a test. He said he didn't have none at the time. So every time I got a free day or two, every other week or so, I would come up to the restaurant just to say hello. And he eventually hired me as a dishwasher prep cook. I had some challenges being the only black guy in that kitchen. Most kitchens I ever worked in, I was the only brother because I came right out of prison into a high-end California French white tablecloth restaurant. So most of the guys in there were Hispanic, Salvadorian, Puerto Rican, folks like that. And highly skilled, highly motivated, high sense of urgency, crafty how they moved. And so I had a few challenges breaking into that culture because I didn't speak the language. And so I had to, there were times I had to get gangster a little bit in kitchens, not only to defend myself, but to let folks know that I'm here to learn and work as a team. So always when you're new on a job or whatever, you have to prove yourself. And so I was that guy who came to work 2 or 3 hours early every day, left early, came in off my off days, never took a day off, never took a lunch break. So I became what you call a knowledge jacker, right? So I'm the type of guy, especially when you come from poverty and you have learning disabilities, we learn visually. So if you show me how to do one thing, if you say, put the sauce here, then you're going to lay 4 pencil asparagus this way, and you're going to drape that New York strip that's medium over those 4 asparagus, but don't splash it on the red wine reduction, I'm gonna do it perfect, and I might even make it better than you. And so that's how I learn. So when you're following your gift, when you're hustling in your purpose, you learn quickly. You don't have to go repeat. Is because that's what you're supposed to be doing. So I learned very quickly in that industry. And then I moved around, Marriott Hotels, Ritz-Carlton, Holiday Inn, Hotel Bel Air, L'Ermitage. I had a catering business.
How long were you a dishwasher for?
I just off and on for years, because a lot of times in a culinary world, you're a cook first. You got to cook first for years before you become a sous chef. So a lot of times, because I didn't go to culinary school and I didn't understand the book science of cooking, I would have to apply as a dishwasher. And that was my strategy. Go in as a dishwasher, wait for the cook to call in sick, go on vacation or get fired, and then you step up and say, Chef, I can work that station. So what I used to do is study the cooks, every position, especially the saute, hot app, and saucier guys, because I was waiting for my break. It's almost like a young drug dealer, right, who works for the big drug dealer, right? So he's moving a lot of product, and the big drug dealer takes notice, and he becomes that number one pusher for this guy. But subconsciously, he's studying the operation and procedure and strategies and how he does it. So if that top drug dealer gets killed or he gets indicted and go to prison, then he's ready to move in. So the streets really trained me for corporate America. Prison trained me for corporate America. I was just very strategic in how I moved. And so, and then me being black in this field, a lot of times I probably was a DI hire, which was cool because I worked for their marketing promotional that, hey, we embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they get what they want. I get what I want. I want the title. Even though a lot of times I didn't get the money, I didn't care about the money. I wanted the title because the titles open doors for you and gives me access. And for me, it was all about access. See, I never chased money, even when I was on the streets. I chased the gift, the purpose. Then I chased the relationships. Relationships lead to opportunities. Opportunities, brought this in today, lead to the bag. It's 100,000, you know?
Put it up.
Yeah.
The cameras that can see. Hold it up.
It ain't the real. It ain't real though, right? But I use this in my training.
Yeah.
Right? Because this the imagery when kids say they want to secure the bag, right? So my question to them is your actions and how you move in alignment with securing the bag? And it's not. You can't get your ass up in the morning. You cannabis out, lazy, no sense of urgency, and you're not working on what your gift is. So those are the parameters that I put around the bag and the process. It takes longer to get it until then. So, yeah, man.
That was beautifully said, because that's why I asked you how long you were a dishwasher, because I wanted people to hear and understand, because if they see top selling books and all these things you're doing on social media and how successful you are, not only were you in prison, but you also got out and you had to, I don't know if you had to swallow your pride or check your ego to where, like, you know, you're greater than just being a dishwasher, but you knew the bigger picture.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to be a dishwasher. I'm going to grind right now.
Yes.
And then as soon as that dude don't show up, it's go time.
But here's the thing, right? So again, part of that process, if you force the process, mean move too fast, you're gonna fail. So if I go in for a cook job and say I can cook this shit and bypass the dishwashing, and I jump on that line and there's an 8-top with pancier, foie gras, halibut, with infused oils, I'm like, what the fuck is this? I'm not gonna make it. So you take the lesser position so you can analyze the kitchen operation, learn the menu, learn ingredients, build the relationships, and you wait for your time. So you can't rush the process for anything. Everything takes time. Steve Jobs lost Apple. They fired him before and came back with a vengeance. And so for me, failure has never been an option. It's hard for me to fail. And so I always played it safe. Took the lesser job with the lesser pay, learn everything, and then move up strategically. And so a dishwasher is important. He's one of the most important people in the kitchen because he is the guy they call up when someone calls in sick. He's the guy that makes sure that the cooks have their plates, their saute pans, their chef spoons, and all their different tools. But the dishwasher is also very important to the owner and to the chef of the restaurant, because he's going to tell you when the waiters bring the food back, are people eating the food? And so me as a chef who was extra loyal to my boss, and I see food coming back and no one's eating the vegetables or the potatoes. Hey, chef, man, there's a problem, man. Ain't nobody eating the potatoes. They seem like they salty to me. There's no flavor. Then the chef busts the balls of those cooks. And so that's the role of the dishwasher. The dishwasher is the foundation of that restaurant. It's like you can't build a highway till you have the rebar, then you pour the concrete. Now you start building the infrastructure on that foundation. And so that's what it's like for me, even when I used to sell drugs back in days. So all the guys that I used to sell for 6 months, 8 months later, it was buying from me. I was running up to hey, man, I got them rocks, man. Hey, man, I got them OZs, them half a keys, them 8 balls, them 16s. I got that weed. So I was taking the risk of getting murdered, robbed, or getting busted for the older drug dealer. So I knew that was the foundation for me to become a drug dealer, because I understand all the systems of drug dealing. When you walk up to a car, the mindset of a smoker, the mindset of people tweaking. If I just went straight to a big drug dealer, I wouldn't have that experience. And so it's easy for you to get got or tricked or played without that level of experience. That's why dishwashing is important. That's where all your money's. They just, if they're throwing forks and spoons in the trash can, they're breaking plates, wine goblets, and things like that. So that's a very important position. So I take pride when people ask me, when people sometimes like praise my success I'm just a glorified dishwasher, because I still wash. I love washing dishes, because that's where, you build camaraderie. That's where you build loyalty, and you take care of those cooks. They're going to make sure you get to, get that steak at the end of the night, those burritos, that's tacos, whatever's going on the line that night, So.
I will say I had a job as a dishwasher, and I did not fall through with it. When I got out and had all these, couldn't get a job when I was on probation, a friend of mine was like, hey, my boss said, dishwasher here, it was called Smash Pig downtown here in Vegas. And I had no idea what dishwasher did or anything, but I'm like, man, I need anything right now. I can't get a job. I'm trying to get my PO off my back.
Yeah.
Went in there and they had me scrub. I was thinking there was gonna be like a dishwasher or something. No, I was in there hand scrubbing, and you had to do it because they're gonna need those pots and whatever again at some point.
Yes.
Oh, I worked one day, maybe 2-3 days, and I was like, yeah, this ain't it.
Yeah, ain't everybody not cut for that,
No.
And in prison we didn't have dish machines, so I trained doing it by hand, and so coming out having a dish machine, I didn't like that. It was too complicated for me. Broke down a lot. They had a lot of buttons on there, and there's certain things you had to, man, just give me a 3-compartment sink and let me get down. Give me 2 guys. We wash, rinse. We wash, soak, rinse, and that was it. So it was an interesting learning track for me of how I came to chefdom, and back to like all of my successes, even writing Cooked. I was working at Bellagio. I was the first African-American executive chef running Cafe Bellagio, $30 million grossing restaurant a year. A guy just called and said, hey, man, I love your story. He read about me on a blog. I used to cook cocaine, then a prison chef, then gourmet chef, made it all the way to Bellagio. I never thought about writing a book. I never chased it, never wrote, and he said, hey, you got a great story. Back then, Anthony Bourdain was pretty hot. He was coming on big, and they wanted something a little different. He was a user. I was a seller. He was a heroin addict.
Oh,
and, so he didn't sell. He was just a heroin. He never was a great chef. He was a good chef. And I don't consider myself a great chef either. I'm a good chef. I know how to manage people. I know how to run operations and systems, right? And so I wrote the book. He came out from New York. He said, look, man, I love your story. I said, if you want, if I help you get a book deal, are we in business? And I said, yeah. And so he came out here. We sat in my restaurant, and we wrote a proposal. He said, well, what the name's going to be? And I said, Cooked. The original name was from cocaine to foie gras, right? And so when you think about cooked, you're cooking.
Yeah.
And then you got cooked. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then so we wrote the book, and I had a ghostwriter, a guy, Ian Spilgman. He wrote a couple books that went to movie. And he was a white Jewish dude from out of New York. He spent 6 months in the county jail. He was an alcoholic dope fiend. And so he was a great writing partner for me because he was able to really get me to bring out process. Like he asked me once, he says, when did you start stealing? Like, what was your first crime? I'm like, fuck, who thinks about that shit? And I'm thinking back. I took a lot of heat from my family about this. And I said, my grandfather taught me how to steal. Remember I told you I used to clean the laundry mats in the Jewish delicatessens up in Beverly Hills? Well, I watched my grandfather steal sugar. I watched him steal cookies. But he didn't steal it to sell it. He got it for his family because he had 4 kids. And all 4 kids got a brown paper bag of sugar. You're kind of young, so back in the late 70s, there was a sugar shortage all around the world.
Damn,
and sugar was a big, I know. Sugar was a big deal. And so at these bakeries, they would have these big tubs of sugar. Then my grandfather, he cleaned laundromats. And so he had the keys to all the laundromats, and he would take some quarters out of there and put them in a paper roll. And then I would steal those from him. And so my grandfather never says, grandson, let me show you how to steal. He allowed me to watch him. That's why it's important to model the behaviors you want your children and people in your community to embrace. So if your kids don't see marriage work, commitment, family work, education work, they're not going to embrace something they never seen work. And so my grandfather's mentality coming from the South, they don't look at it as stealing when you take from the white man. You know, like Robin Hood, steal from the rich, give to the poor. It's like, oh, they got plenty of money. They're not going to, plus they're not even paying me my worth. So I'm going to take these cookies. I'm going to take the sugar. I'm going to take the quarters. That was my grandfather's mentality. And my grandfather's one of the greatest mentors and influences in my life. He never came and said, I'm going to teach you this, grandson. But he made me go to work with him. Attention to detail, like waxing and buffing floors. If there was a little wax buildup in the corner and I missed it, or I squeezy those windows and there was a line through there, he had big hands. He would take his finger and he would thump me in the back of my head. Boy, didn't I tell you to make sure you got that window right? Get that wax up off that floor. And I would always hold my bald head. You know, they call bald heads cavituses back in the days, right? And so that type of discipline, which these youngsters need today, they need man discipline. You know, you got to meet them where they are. You know, you can't say, okay, young people, we're not going to fight anymore, doing these different things. Like, you know, you know what I'm saying? No, you need your ass whooped. That's what you need. You need that good hand upside your head, that structure, discipline of authoritative figures. And that's what's lacking today.
We're going to wrap up here in a second, but I want to touch on what you just said. I agree. I think about this often with the way I see people and their kids sometimes. I don't have kids. I hate to give parents advice or anything, but I know for me, I'm black and Mexican, but my black grandfather, whenever I'd cuss, he make me wash my mouth with soap. And I learned not to cuss around him anymore. And I just think sometimes, I just agree with you.
Yeah, I forgot my daughter was over here because she don't like me cursing.
So I'm going to finish up with two questions for you. The first one is, with everything you've been through, I'm sure mentally your mind's been over the place. What's a piece of advice you would give some men out there to help them get their mind back right?
Yeah. I think that some of the advice I mentioned, some of the things that I mentioned earlier is that you got to have a miracle. You got to have that epiphany. There has to be a defining moment in your life, whether it's already happened and you're thinking about it and you're letting that moment shift you. Never let no one put you in a box. I never let anyone put me in a box. I'm international. I don't have any geographical lines that's keeping me in one place. So my advice to all the men, women, and youngsters, or anyone who might be struggling, who might have had tremendous setbacks. Within every setback, the blueprint is there for the comeback. You just have to be ready. You just have to take action. And you have to be tired of being in the situation, in the circumstances that you're in. People change when they're tired. People lose weight when they're tired. People heal when they're tired of being sick. And when you're tired of being broke and when you're tired of being unemployed, that means you're ready to go through the fire, through the process to become that best version of yourself.
Mic drop.
That's real game.
Last question. What's a quote you live by?
You ready?
Yep.
And make sure all your other listeners hear this.
Listen up.
Keep the hustle, change the product.
Hey.
Yes, sir.
Chef Jeff, I truly appreciate you, man, coming by, giving me these, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, can you sign them?
I will.
All right, cool. So thank you for bringing these books, sharing your story, your knowledge. I love the passion. I love the way you transformed yourself. Like I said, you are somebody who inspired me without even knowing it back in 2016. That made me feel like I can change and be capable of being great. And that's my mission moving forward, is to keep pushing, share my story the way you share yours, to help somebody who needs it, you know, who feels like they're at the rock bottom. That's what this podcast is about. So thank you for being open, honest, raw, and your true self.
Appreciate you.
Leave you guys with the word, something similar to what we talked about today. Do not be afraid to take those small steps. When you take those small steps, it will lead you to great distances. Do not drop your ego. Do the hard, dirty work now so you can thrive and flourish later. Be patient. Stick with the grind. 2 words. Keep growing.
Woo. Awesome.